Hold on to your hats, guys. The winds are howling with a fierce intensity today, sweeping through towns and cities and leaving everyone on edge. The gusts are so strong they seem to carry a message. Winter is here, and it means business. As we brace ourselves against these turbulent winds, there's an unmistakable chill in the air, a harbinger of the tough winter ahead. With temperatures dropping and the atmosphere becoming increasingly unstable, it's clear that this season will test our resilience. Bundle up, stay safe, and keep an eye on those weather updates. This winter's storms might just be getting started. What looks to be a significant outbreak of cold weather and some rare winter conditions potentially reaching all the way down to the Gulf Coast and into the southeastern United States by next week. Now, that's still a bit of time away, so it's a little early to get too specific. What I'll do tonight is break down what's happening right now, what might occur in the coming days, and who may be at the greatest risk of potential impacts next week. Here's a look at current temperatures across the country. Today, the Rockies and Plains have warmed up considerably, but it's much colder in parts of the Great Lakes and Northeast. Chicago is sitting at 17 degrees Fahrenheit this evening as darkness falls, while Pittsburgh is at 19 degrees Fahrenheit. Here in Raleigh, the temperature has dropped to about 32 degrees Fahrenheit and continues to fall. The deep south, however, is relatively mild with temperatures in the 50s and 60s. Cool, but not as cold as it has been in recent weeks. Meanwhile, the Southwest is warm, with Phoenix at 70 degrees Fahrenheit and Los Angeles and San Diego around 72 degrees Fahrenheit this afternoon. Most of the snow today has been confined to lake effect areas where cold air flowing over the lakes has produced snow totals as high as 18 inches in Sardinia, 16 inches in Point Rock, and 13 inches in Cadia. These snowfalls are not associated with a major storm, but rather instability over the lakes, along with occasional snow squalls. Looking at advisories, the map is relatively quiet compared to last week, when we saw two major storms, one in the central U.S. and the other in the southeast in Texas. Currently, there's a small area under winter weather advisories, including western Pennsylvania, eastern Ohio, parts of West Virginia, and areas near Lake Ontario. A winter storm warning is in effect across the Allegheny Plateau and Appalachian region from the Laurel Highlands into parts of West Virginia. We're also dealing with wind challenges in the high plains, particularly east of the Rockies in Montana and parts of Wyoming. Unfortunately, fire weather conditions persist in Southern California, though there's some good news on that front, which I'll discuss shortly. Southern California fire danger update. Looking at California, the air remains very dry this evening. However, dew points are expected to rise as we move into tomorrow. While they'll start off low in the morning, by the afternoon and beyond, a Pacific flow will bring much needed moisture, with dew points climbing into the 30s, 40s, and even low 50s along the coast. This increase in moisture will help mitigate fire risks. While the current conditions still pose challenges, the trend toward higher humidity is definitely a step in the right direction. Wind speeds, which have been breezy in usual areas like the Grapevine and higher elevations, are expected to decrease significantly tonight and tomorrow. Gusts will remain lower across the Los Angeles basin, with only isolated stronger winds in the mountains later at night. Overall, this is promising news as conditions improve heading into the end of the week. Central and eastern U.S. weather through Saturday. Turning to the central and eastern U.S., we're seeing damp weather in South Texas and Louisiana, which will push offshore soon. Drier air will move in, though cloud cover will linger across the Gulf states and Florida. It's not a bad weather pattern overall. However, challenges remain in higher elevations in the Great Lakes region. Colder air aloft continues to trigger bursts of heavier snow. These conditions will persist through tomorrow night before tapering off by Friday, when the weather will quiet down. There's another Clipper system expected to cross Lake Superior into northern Ontario, bringing additional snow. Toward the end of the week and into Friday night, milder air will return, ushering in rain. Weather update: heavy rain, thunderstorms, and winter weather impacts. Rainfall could be heavy in areas like Louisiana, Mississippi, western and middle Tennessee, and even parts of central and northern Illinois. At the onset, temperatures in the Great Lakes region may lead to some freezing rain and slushy snow. Zooming into this area, specifically on the south side of Chicago and northwest Indiana, there's a chance of freezing rain late Friday evening with wet, slushy snow mixed in. While temperatures are warming up from current levels, it's not quite enough to eliminate the cold entirely. Mountain snow and front range cold heading west. There's another push of extremely cold air descending, accompanied by mountain snow. While snowfall in the mountains isn't unusual, temperatures will drop sharply and snow could fall heavily along the Colorado Front Range, especially Friday night. In addition to snow, winds will increase, temperatures will plummet, and visibility may become very poor. This could lead to hazardous travel conditions, particularly Friday evening. Snow totals for the next 60 hours. Here's a look at the snow forecast for the next 60 hours. Significant snow is expected in parts of Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and western New York, with light snow extending into the mountains of Virginia, North Carolina, and eastern Tennessee. In Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana, snowfall will generally be light, less than an inch for most areas unless you're near the lakefront. The Laurel Highlands and ski areas in West Virginia could see substantial totals, with some areas possibly reaching up to a foot. However, while the models show 21 inches in certain spots, totals are more likely to be around 12 inches in places like Davis and Snowshoe. Western Pennsylvania, eastern Ohio, and areas near Lake Erie could receive a couple of inches of snow, with similar amounts possible in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, and even northeastern Maryland and northern Delaware. The bigger picture, next cold wave and snow. While temperatures will rebound slightly by the end of the week across the south central states, another wave of cold air is on the horizon. This pattern will bring brief warming ahead of the next system, but cold weather will quickly return. Discussing the next Arctic blast. Looking at the upper level pattern, the European ensemble shows a significant ridge of high pressure over Alaska. At the same time, cold air aloft, indicated by blue shading, is moving from Siberia across the North Pole into central Canada and then into the United States. This cross-polar flow often brings extreme cold, high heating bills, and favorable conditions for winter storms. The position of the trough next week will determine its impact. If it picks up moisture from the southwest or Gulf of Mexico, it could lead to significant winter weather. If it moves through the Great Lakes as a cold, dry system, it may only produce mountain snow and limited impacts elsewhere. By the second half of next week, models are converging on a more definitive forecast. The placement of this trough will play a critical role in shaping weather patterns for much of the United States. Digging back to the south of California, we see a potential setup for moisture to develop between the trough and the ridge that will be centered east of Florida. This configuration sets the Gulf of Mexico up for some potential mischief. We've been discussing this possibility for a few days now, and it's starting to look like it may become a reality. As the trough lifts out and high pressure rebuilds at the end of the month, Florida will warm up significantly. Temperatures will begin to moderate across the rest of the eastern U.S. However, this doesn't mean we're escaping winter storms entirely. It simply means the extreme cold will retreat northward, returning to areas where it typically resides by the end of January. Looking ahead to February, it should be milder overall. This doesn't rule out the possibility of a significant storm on the East Coast, but it does mean we're unlikely to see snow along the Gulf Coast. That's the distinction we're making here. Let's look at temperature anomalies. It's quite warm across Canada while chilly conditions persist in the east. Temperatures will briefly warm toward the end of the week, but it will remain chilly in the southeast and mid-Atlantic regions. Saturday, the 18th, will mark a significant transition day, with much of eastern Canada and the Northeast all the way down to Florida seeing above average temperatures, except in areas experiencing rain or snow, particularly in the mountains. Looking ahead, a substantial shot of cold air is on its way. reminiscent of the significant cold outbreak we experienced before Christmas a few years ago. We may see a few record lows, but the larger story is the intensity and widespread coverage of this cold air. By early next week, including Martin Luther King Jr. Day and Inauguration Day in DC, temperatures will be cold coast to coast. Very few places across the U.S. will experience above average temperatures, and northern Mexico will also feel the chill. The cold air will even extend into Cuba by Monday night into Tuesday. Outside of South Florida, the cold will continue to move south and east, bringing frigid days and nights next week. Temperatures should begin to rebound by the end of the week, but the South will take longer to warm up, with multiple freezes expected until at least the end of next weekend. After that, more cold air is on the way, but it will meet resistance as high pressure builds back. This creates a significant battle zone where big winter storms are likely to form. We'll need to monitor the end of January closely to see how this unfolds. The European operational model is just one of many models, and we can expect some changes in its forecasts. To provide a reference point, look at DC. Temperatures will drop significantly Monday into Tuesday, falling below freezing during the day on Monday and possibly down to 15 degrees Fahrenheit or below zero on the European model. Many areas will feel this cold. In Atlanta, for instance, temperatures may not rise above freezing for several days. Even places like Houston could experience a day where temperatures remain below freezing, which is notable for the region. As someone who grew up along Interstate 10 in Baton Rouge, I know that such cold temperatures often lead to school closures. While the region will bounce back quickly, it will take a few days to get out of the deep freeze. Now let's discuss snow, which is also worth watching. There is potential for at least an inch of snow in the usual areas through the end of the week. However, the potential for snow is growing in places like West Texas, Western Kansas, Oklahoma, and eventually areas farther south, such as Texas and Louisiana. Some regions, like the west outside of the mountains, will likely remain snow-free due to cold air pushing storms to the south. Areas like Omaha, Kansas City, Madison, Sioux Falls, Des Moines, and St. Louis may see snow chances shift southward. These areas recently experienced significant snow, so the pattern shift may not be unwelcome. Meanwhile, snow potential is filling in across the Carolinas, the East Coast, and up into Maine. Zooming in, there is even a possibility of snow reaching the western Gulf of Mexico and the Florida Panhandle, which would be extremely rare. Timing-wise, snow could begin Sunday night into Monday in the plains and spread south Monday night into Tuesday. There's a 60% chance of accumulating snow in East Texas and central northern Louisiana, with chances extending to Houston, Corpus Christi, San Antonio, Del Rio, New Orleans, Gulfport, and Mobile. While these chances are lower, around 20 to 30%, they are still significant signals for this region. In the Pacific Northwest, there will even be a brief period in some regions of Western Canada where temperatures attempt to rise above the below normal anomalies that have been observed. However, this won't last long. Once again, the ensemble models are the focus of our attention, specifically the GDFS ensembles. There is a great deal of confidence that a massive low height anomaly will form over the continental United States, allowing extremely cold air to sink into the central and eastern regions of the country. Additionally, this setup will create conditions for a prolonged pattern in which storms can track along the southern portion of this anomaly. When was the last time we had such a favorable snowstorm setup? I can't even remember. The South has already experienced some foreboding snowfall this year. And as the rest of January progresses, I believe there will be multiple more opportunities for snow. Moreover, this is the type of arrangement that will likely target the Northeast. Many of our most notable nor'easters, northeast blizzards, and Appalachian runners have developed under similar patterns. This setup has me fully convinced that something significant is going to happen. Whenever you see ensemble models displaying this pattern consistently, it's worth paying attention. Naturally, below average temperatures will follow whenever a significant troughing pattern like this is present. However, over the next few days, parts of southern Minnesota and Iowa may experience a brief taste of warmer temperatures. Friday might even feel pleasant and warm, with some areas 20 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit above average. This warmth will spread slightly eastward, but it will only last a short time. Once the next major Arctic blast arrives on January 19th or 20th, the entire United States will experience below normal temperatures and a prolonged cold spell. Examining the ensemble models again, we see a strong indication that temperatures in the southeast will be below average, particularly around January 24th. Looking even further ahead to January 29th, below average temperatures remain widespread. The only exceptions to this cold snap will likely be in Maine, northern Florida, Alaska, and Hawaii. Everyone else should prepare for the cold. There's no need to panic. This isn't something that happens every winter, but it's also not catastrophic. Yes, the language may sound dramatic, but don't be alarmed. Just be prepared. There are plenty of warnings here to give everyone a heads up. Temperatures could drop low enough to pose minor issues for the Texas power grid, so it's wise to prepare for sporadic power outages. That said, I don't believe we'll see a repeat of the events from previous years. In the Denver area and much of the central U.S., be ready for bitterly cold temperatures. Prepare yourself for the cold. It's unusual for mid-January, but we'll get through it. It's also important to note that snowstorms are inevitable whenever a significant cold pattern like this occurs. Just as storms form regardless of temperature, this setup increases the likelihood of significant snowfall. The Climate Prediction Center estimates a 20 to 40% chance of heavy snowfall across the region between January 18th and 24th, and I agree with this assessment. You might hear claims about a repeat of 1977 or comparisons to the March 1993 superstorm, as some models depict enormous blizzards. Don't fall for these exaggerated predictions. Forecasts that attempt to predict specific storms more than 5 days in advance are rarely accurate. Broad outlines, such as identifying areas with a slight risk of heavy snow, are useful. However, individual model runs showing dramatic blizzards should not be trusted until we're within 4 to 5 days of the event. Only then can we begin making accurate predictions. And guys, if you enjoyed this one, don't forget to like and leave a comment below. I'll see you all in the next video. Oh.